Part 1, The Max Delta Hour. Episode 2, The Patch Notes Are Real. All right, so episode 1 was the foundation. The game is real. Gaming was the tutorial. Money is the resource system. Policy is the patch notes. Culture is the story mode. Technology is the weapon tree. And your life is the character you are building every single day. But episode 2 is where we stop talking about the theory and start looking at the damn screen, because the patch notes are not theoretical. They are happening right now in real time, while you are sleeping, while you are working, while you are scrolling, while you are distracted by some stupid outrage clip that was probably algorithmically shoved in your face to keep you mad for 12 more minutes. The rules are changing. The scoreboard is changing. The economy is changing. The culture is changing. The tech is changing. The job market is changing. The platforms are changing. The algorithms are changing. And half the country is still walking around like they are playing the launch version of the game. They are not. The meta changed. The patch notes are real, and if you are not reading them, somebody else is building around them. Welcome to the Max Delta Hour. I'm Max Delta, Army veteran, author, gamer, investor, professional overthinker of civilization's slow motion car crash. And this show is where politics, gaming, money, culture, technology, and real life all smash into each other. Not in the polite way, not in the corporate safe way, not in the carefully sanitized, HR approved fake smile way, in the real way, the way people talk when they are sitting there going, wait a minute, something is off here. And today's episode is called The Patch Notes Are Real. Let me start with something that hit me yesterday. I was watching this election stuff out of California and Los Angeles, and I had one of those moments where you just kind of stare at the screen and go, hold on, what the hell am I looking at? And I want to be clear right out of the gate. I am not claiming I can prove fraud from my chair. I am not an election worker. I am not inside the ballot room. I am not pretending I have some secret file sitting next to me with all the answers. That is not what I am saying. What I am saying is this: a system that requires public trust should not look like a black box. And if normal people look at the scoreboard and say, that looks weird, the answer cannot just be, shut up, don't ask, trust us, you are stupid, you are dangerous, you are a conspiracy theorist, because that does not create trust. That creates suspicion. And this is where the gaming brain kicks in. Because in a game, if the scoreboard updated overnight and one faction suddenly got a huge boost while another side barely moved, players would lose their damn minds. They would ask for logs. They would ask for the replay. They would ask what server the match was on. They would ask if there was lag. They would ask if the scoring system changed. They would ask if some objective counted differently. They would ask if one team had a multiplier. They would ask if there was an exploit. And you know what? That would be normal. That would not be crazy. That would be basic competitive behavior, because players understand something that a lot of institutions seem to have forgotten. If people are playing for stakes, the scoreboard has to be trusted. If the scoreboard looks strange, you explain it clearly, fast, with receipts. Now, maybe the answer is simple. Maybe it is mail ballots. Maybe it is county level reporting. Maybe it is batches being processed from different areas. Maybe it is provisional ballots. Maybe it is signature curing. Maybe it is normal election administration. Fine. Then explain it like you are talking to adults. Do not act shocked when people who live in the real world pay taxes, work jobs, raise kids, serve in the military, run businesses, and actually have skin in the game look at a strange update and say, that looks fishy. Because sometimes that looks fishy is not a legal claim. It is not a court filing. It is not a final conclusion. Sometimes it is just a human being with pattern recognition, and pattern recognition is not a crime. This is where people get dishonest. They act like there are only two options. Option one, you accept everything instantly, no questions asked, because the institutions are perfect, and anyone who doubts them is a bad person. Option two, you believe every crazy thing on the internet, no matter how stupid, because some guy with a flag emoji and 6 burner accounts said it happened. No, that is bullshit. There is a third option, the adult option, the player option. You say, I do not know yet, but I want to see the logs. I want to understand the process. I want the rules explained before the match starts. I want the scoring to be transparent. I want the public to be able to audit what happened. And I want institutions to stop acting like asking questions is the same thing as burning the building down. That is not radical. That is basic trust maintenance. And that is the real subject of this episode. Not one election, not one county, not one late ballot update. The bigger issue is this: the patch notes are real. The rules change all the time, and the people who are affected by the rule changes are usually the last ones to understand what changed. Think about that. In gaming, patch notes are expected. A developer changes armor values, patch notes. They nerf a tank, patch notes. They buff artillery, God help us, patch notes. They change matchmaking, patch notes. They rebalance economy, patch notes. They tweak penetration values, reload speeds, map rotations, damage models, spotting mechanics, patch notes. Players might argue about whether the changes are good or bad, but at least the idea is normal. The rules changed. Here is what changed. Here is why it changed. Here is how it affects the game. Now, adapt. But real life? Real life changes the rules constantly, and somehow regular people are supposed to just figure it out by getting punched in the face. Interest rates change. Suddenly buying a house feels impossible. Insurance rules change. Suddenly your payment jumps. Taxes change. Suddenly your paycheck feels smaller. Energy policy changes. Suddenly everything costs more. Bank rules change. Suddenly credit tightens. Platform rules change. Suddenly your content gets throttled. Algorithm rules change. Suddenly nobody sees your business. AI changes. Suddenly your job, your skill set, your career path, your kid's future, all of it is sitting under a giant question mark, and people still say, why are people anxious? Why are people angry? Why do people not trust institutions? Why do people feel like the system is rigged? Are you kidding me? Because the damn rules keep changing and nobody explains the patch notes. Now, I'm not saying every change is evil. That would be lazy. Some changes are necessary. Some patches fix broken things. Some updates improve the game. Sometimes the old meta was trash and needed to die. But the problem is not just change. The problem is hidden change. The problem is quiet change. The problem is when the people making the rules benefit from the public not understanding them. That is where things get dangerous. Let's talk money for a second, because money is where people feel the patch notes first. You can talk about culture, you can talk about politics, you can talk about ideology, but when the grocery bill jumps, nobody needs a PhD to understand something changed. When rent goes up, something changed. When a car payment feels like a mortgage, something changed. When your insurance renews and it looks like someone punched you in the wallet, something changed. When people making decent money still feel broke, something changed. And this is where the language matters. Because if you tell people the economy is strong while they are getting smoked in the real economy, they are not going to believe you. They are going to think you are lying. Or worse, they are going to think you have no idea what their life actually feels like. That is a trust problem. And again, gaming explains this perfectly. Imagine you are playing a game. You have the same character, same map, same gear, same routine, but suddenly you are losing every fight. You are taking more damage. Your ammo costs more. Your repairs cost more. Your rewards are smaller. Your grind is longer. Your build feels weaker. And then the developer says, nothing changed. Everything is fine. The game is actually better than ever. You would say, bullshit. Something changed. Show me the patch notes. That is where a lot of people are in real life. They do not have the words for it. They might not know macroeconomics. They might not know monetary policy. They might not know how bond markets work. They might not know how regulation flows through business costs. They might not know how interest rates affect housing affordability, but they know the game feels different. They know the grind got harder. They know bad RNG hits harder than it used to. They know the same decisions that used to be survivable now hurt more. They know a flat tire is not just a flat tire when you are living close to the edge. They know being broke is expensive as hell. They know the scoreboard changed. And if your response to that is to lecture them about how actually, technically, the charts say everything is fine, you are missing the point. People are not living inside your chart. They are living inside the game. Now let's talk about AI, because this might be the biggest patch note of our lifetime. And I do not think people understand how fast this shit is moving. I really do not. We are still acting like AI is this little side tool. like it is spell check with a personality, like it is just some toy that writes emails and makes weird pictures with six fingers. No, AI is not just a tool. AI is a meta shift. It is a weaponry update. It is a production multiplier. It is a skill amplifier. It is also a replacement engine if you refuse to adapt. Both things are true, and that is what makes it dangerous. If you are a creator, AI changes the game. If you are a writer, AI changes the game. If you are a designer, AI changes the game. If you are in sales, marketing, coding, operations, analysis, customer service, media, education, finance, AI changes the game. And people still want to argue about whether it is good or bad. That is not the right question. The right question is, how does this change the meta? Who gets stronger? Who gets weaker? Who gets replaced? Who gets leverage? Who becomes faster? Who becomes obsolete? Who learns the tool? Who pretends the tool is not real until it eats their lunch? That is the patch note. Not AI good or AI bad. That is NPC thinking. Player thinking is, what changed? What can I do now that I could not do before? What can other people do now that they could not do before? What skill just got cheaper? What skill just got more valuable? What old gatekeeper just lost power? What new gatekeeper is forming? Where is the opportunity? Where is the trap? That is how you have to think now, because the old advice is not enough. And I know that sounds harsh, but it is true. Go to school, get a job, keep your head down, work hard, retire safely. That was a build. It worked for a lot of people. It still works for some people, but it is not automatic anymore. The map changed, the economy changed, the tech changed, the culture changed, the institutions changed, trust changed, the cost of living changed, the damn tutorial changed, and people are still handing their kids a strategy guide from 1998 like it is sacred scripture. That is dangerous. Random thought. And this is why I like doing this as a podcast, because I can just say the thing while it is in my head. One of the biggest lies people tell themselves is that stable means safe. Stable job, stable institution, stable company, stable path, stable market, stable system. But sometimes stable just means you are standing still while the world moves around you. And when the patch hits, the person who never adapted gets wrecked the hardest. That is not me saying panic. Do not panic. Panic is stupid. Panic gets you killed in games and in life. But awareness? Awareness is not panic. Awareness is survival. And this brings me back to elections, because the trust issue is bigger than politics. I do not care what side you are on. If half the country does not trust the scoreboard, you have a serious problem. Not a messaging problem, not a branding problem, not a people are too dumb problem, a serious legitimacy problem, because elections are the scoreboard of democracy. And if the scoreboard looks like a black box, people are going to question the match. That should not be controversial. Again, I am not saying every weird-looking update is fraud. I am saying weird-looking updates need clear explanations. I am saying institutions should be obsessed with transparency. I am saying the public should not have to beg to understand how the process works. I am saying if ballots can arrive later, be processed later, be verified later, be cured later, be counted later, then communicate that in a way normal people understand before the internet fills the gap with screenshots, rumors, rage bait, and bullshit. Because if you leave an information vacuum, people will fill it every time. That is not a left-wing thing. That is not a right-wing thing. That is a human thing. Gamers understand this too. If there is no official explanation, players will build one. They will go to Reddit. They will go to Discord. They will post clips. They will compare stats. They will accuse people of cheating. They will accuse the devs of rigging matchmaking. They will say the RNG is broken. They will say the game is pay to win. Sometimes they are wrong. Sometimes they are right. But the reason it explodes is because people hate feeling like the game is lying to them. And real life is no different. People hate feeling like the system is lying to them. And honestly, a lot of institutions earned that distrust. They do not get to act shocked now. You cannot spend years telling people obvious things are not happening, then get mad when they stop believing you. You cannot move goalposts forever and then complain that nobody trusts the goalposts. You cannot call everyone crazy for noticing patterns and then expect them to clap like trained seals when you say, actually, we are the experts. Expertise matters, but credibility matters too, and credibility is earned. not demanded. This is why episode 1 mattered. The game is real. Because once you accept that life is systems, rules, incentives, metas, factions, resources, and patch notes, you stop reacting like an NPC. You start asking better questions. Who benefits? What changed? What is the incentive? What is the risk? What is the cost? What is the opportunity? What is being hidden? What is being framed? What am I being distracted from? What is the actual mechanic underneath the noise? That is not paranoia. That is literacy, systems literacy, media literacy, financial literacy, political literacy, technological literacy, game literacy. And right now, people need all of it. Let's talk culture, because culture is where the patch notes get disguised as entertainment. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable. Culture is not just movies and music and memes. Culture teaches people what is normal, what is heroic, what is embarrassing, what is allowed, what is forbidden, who is respectable, who is dangerous, who gets mocked, who gets protected, who gets forgiven, who gets destroyed. Culture is the story mode, and when the story mode changes, people change with it. This is why I get annoyed when people say, it is just a movie. No, it is not always just a movie. Sometimes it is just a movie. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Sometimes I just want explosions, monsters, tanks, spaceships, vampires, cowboys, whatever. But when every story starts carrying the same assumptions, the same moral framing, the same villains, the same heroes, the same lectures, the same contempt for normal people, that is not random. That is culture moving. That is a patch note. And again, you do not have to scream about every piece of entertainment like a lunatic, but you should notice. Because stories train instincts. They train what people cheer for. They train what people tolerate. They train what people resent. They train what people think is possible. A confident culture builds. A guilty culture apologizes. A culture that celebrates builders creates builders. A culture that celebrates dependency creates dependency. A culture that hates strength eventually becomes weak. A culture that mocks its own history eventually loses its memory. A culture that tells young men they are useless should not act shocked when young men check out. A culture that tells people the future is hopeless should not act shocked when nobody wants to build the future. This is not complicated. It is uncomfortable, but it is not complicated. And here is the thing. This is where the show is going. The max delta hour is not going to be one lane, because life is not one lane. I do not want to sit here and pretend politics is separate from money. It is not. I do not want to pretend gaming is separate from culture. It is not. I do not want to pretend AI is separate from jobs. It is not. I do not want to pretend movies are separate from worldview. They are not. I do not want to pretend elections are separate from institutional trust. They are not. All of this shit connects. That is the whole point. And yeah, sometimes I am going to bounce around like a gummy bear, because that is how real thought works. That is how conversations work. That is how podcasts should work. Not every episode has to sound like a damn TED Talk written by a committee. Sometimes you see an election update, an AI tool, a grocery bill, a game patch, a movie trailer, a stupid headline, and a stock chart, and suddenly your brain goes, wait, these are the same damn mechanics, different skins, same game, and when you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me give you an example. World of Tanks. You can have the best gun on the team and still lose if you are in the wrong position. You can have armor and still get melted if you angle like an idiot. You can have a fast tank and still die if you rush alone. You can have a great win rate and still throw a match because you got impatient. You can have a bad team and still create value if you read the map correctly. You can be outnumbered and still win if the other side overextends. That is life. That is money. That is politics. That is business. That is media. That is content creation. Positioning matters. Timing matters. Information matters. Patience matters. Knowing when to push matters. Knowing when to fall back matters. Knowing when the flank is collapsing matters. Knowing when you are being baited matters. And knowing when the meta changed matters. This is why games are not fake to me. The pixels are fake. The lessons are not. Games teach consequences fast. They teach systems. They teach adaptation. They teach that emotion gets you killed. They teach that bad information makes bad decisions. They teach that maps matter. They teach that resources matter. They teach that teams matter. They teach that if you keep doing the same dumb thing after the patch changed, you are not unlucky. You are stubborn, and stubborn players get farmed. That is America right now in a lot of ways. A whole lot of stubborn players getting farmed. People still trusting old media like it is 1995. People still trusting institutions like they have not burned credibility for years. People still treating debt like it is harmless. People still acting like AI is a toy. People still pretending culture does not matter. People still thinking politics is just vibes and slogans. People still voting for policies without understanding incentives. People still outsourcing their thoughts to algorithms. People still letting the loudest people in the room install garbage software in their head. And then they wonder why everything feels unstable. Here is the raw truth. The people who learn the new rules early get leverage. The people who refuse to learn get managed. That is it. That is the whole thing. If you understand money, you are harder to trap. If you understand media, you are harder to manipulate. If you understand politics, you are harder to surprise. If you understand technology, you are harder to replace. If you understand culture, you are harder to demoralize. If you understand games, systems, incentives, and human behavior, you start seeing the board. And once you see the board, you can start making moves. Now, I am not saying this from some mountaintop like I have it all figured out. I do not. I am building too. I am learning too. I am trying to get my own shit together too. That is part of why I am doing this. I am building the website, building the podcast, building the clips, learning the tools, trying to understand the markets, trying to understand AI, trying to understand where culture is going, trying to understand what the hell is happening to this country. And sometimes I look at it and think, man, this is exciting. And sometimes I look at it and think, man, this is dangerous as hell. Both are true. That is what makes this moment feel alive. We are in one of those periods where the game is not settled. The meta is unstable. The old bosses are weak. The new tools are powerful. The old institutions are angry. The new players are weird. The economy is fragile. The culture is volatile. The platforms are changing. The technology is accelerating. And regular people have more tools than ever, but also more noise than ever. That is a dangerous combination, but it is also an opportunity. This is why I do not want this show to be Doom. I am tired of Doom. Doom is easy. Doom gets clicks. Doom makes people feel smart because they predicted everything would suck. Congratulations. That is not hard. What is harder is seeing the problems clearly and still building. That is the player mindset. Not blind optimism, not fake positivity, not pretending everything is fine, but also not curling up in a ball because the patch notes look scary. Read the patch notes, adjust your build, move. If AI is changing work, learn AI. If money is getting tighter, learn money. If politics is changing your industry, pay attention. If culture is demoralizing people, build something better. If the media is lying, stop outsourcing your worldview. If platforms are unstable, build your own hub. If your job is vulnerable, build skills. If your health is slipping, fix the foundation. If your circle is full of NPCs, find players. Do not just sit there and get farmed. And yes, I know that sounds blunt. Good. It should. Because a lot of people need blunt, me included. Sometimes I need somebody to look at me and say, bro, what the hell are you doing? Stop drifting. Stop reacting. Stop pretending you do not see the problem. Stop waiting for permission. Stop acting like the game is paused. It is not paused. The match is live. That is the energy I want for this show. Not anger for anger's sake, not yelling into a microphone like a maniac, but raw, unfiltered, dangerous in the sense that it is honest, exciting because it feels like something is happening, because something is happening. The world is changing fast. And if all we do is sit around waiting for official permission to notice it, we are already behind. So back to the election thing for a second, because this is the perfect example. A normal person sees numbers change in a way that looks strange. They ask a question. The system says, this is normal. Okay. Then show the process. Explain the batches. Explain what ballots were counted. Explain where they came from. Explain why one update moved one way. Explain what remains uncounted. Explain what safeguards exist. explain the timeline, explain the audit, explain the cure process, explain it like public trust matters, because it does. And if you cannot explain it simply, do not be shocked when people assume you are hiding something. That is true whether you are talking about elections, banks, AI companies, government agencies, social media platforms, or game developers. If the system affects people, people deserve to understand the system. That is not extremism, that is citizenship, that is adulthood, that is player mode. And by the way, this is not just about government. Corporations do this too. Platforms do this constantly. You wake up one day and your reach is gone. Your video does not get pushed. Your account gets flagged. Your business traffic drops. Your ad cost changes. Your payment processor changes rules. Your store gets buried. Your content gets demonetized. Your search ranking disappears. And the official explanation is some vague robot nonsense like, we are always working to improve user experience. Get the hell out of here. Tell me what changed. That is the patch note. This is why people need their own hubs, their own websites, their own email lists, their own communities, their own skills, their own assets, their own ability to create. Because if your entire life runs through systems you do not control, you are always one update away from getting wrecked. That is not paranoia. That is modern life. That is why I built the site. That is why I am doing the podcast. That is why I am doing the briefs. That is why I am putting this stuff in one place. Because I do not want everything I build trapped inside somebody else's algorithm. YouTube is great. TikTok is useful. Twitch is fun. Discord is a community hub. But the website is mine. That is the base. That is the home system. That is where the faction lives. That is where the archive lives. That is where the build starts. And I think more people need to think that way. Not everyone needs to start a podcast. Not everyone needs a website. But everyone needs some kind of base, some kind of skill stack, some kind of resource plan, some kind of community, some kind of way to not be completely helpless when the next patch hits, because it will hit. The next patch is always coming. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a choice. You can play NPC mode, react to everything, believe whatever your feed tells you, accept every rule change after it already hit you, complain about the scoreboard but never learn how scoring works, mock people for asking questions, outsource your thinking, trust the algorithm, spend your money on cosmetics while your build is trash, and then act shocked when life farms you. Or you can play player mode. You can read the patch notes, you can ask better questions, you can learn the systems, you can build skills, you can stack resources, you can find your faction, you can notice when the meta changes, you can refuse to be shamed out of your own eyes, you can say, I do not know everything, but I am paying attention, and I am not going to pretend I do not see what I see. That is episode 2. The patch notes are real, the game is real. The scoreboard matters, the rules change, the meta changed. AI is not waiting. The economy is not waiting. The culture is not waiting. The platforms are not waiting. The institutions are not waiting. So why the hell are you? Read the patch notes. Build your stats. Stack your resources. Find your faction. Stop playing like an NPC. And when the scoreboard looks weird, ask questions. Calmly, clearly, relentlessly. Because trust is not built by telling people to shut up. Trust is built by showing the work. And listen, this is where I want to land this thing, because I do not want people walking away from this episode thinking the message is just everything is rigged, everything is broken, everything is hopeless. No, that is not the message. The message is the rules are changing, so wake the hell up. There is a big difference. A player does not need the game to be perfect. A player needs information. A player needs awareness. A player needs discipline. A player needs enough humility to admit when the build is not working, and enough aggression to make a move when the window opens. That is what I want this show to be. A place where we look at politics, money, gaming, culture, AI, tech, media, and all the weird shit happening around us, and ask what changed, who benefits, what is the mechanic, where is the trap, where is the opportunity, how do we build from here? Because the people who understand the patch notes early do not just survive better, they move better, they build better, they spot the traps faster, they stop getting surprised by obvious incentives, they stop asking permission from people who are already behind, they stop acting like the old strategy guide is sacred. They start playing the game that actually exists. Not the game they were promised, not the game they wish existed, the real one. This has been the Max Delta Hour. I'm Max Delta, Episode 2. The patch notes are real. If this hit, check out Episode 1, The Game is Real, and the Max Delta briefs at maxdelta-hour.versal.app. Follow the show on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, and Discord. The game is real, the patch notes are real, and we are just getting started.